What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Thursday morning edition of the Daily Dime here at FTNFantasy.com. My name is Zac Graham, aka Kawaisenberg DFS, joined once again by my good buddy Alex Blickle. Alex, coming off a wild night of NBA action, 10 games. We had injuries, we had upsets, we had overtime to close the night. Just 4 games on tonight's slate, but a lot of studs available in the DFS streets, the prop streets. We'll talk some pick six as well. How you feeling, man?
Yeah, feeling good. Coming off a nice pick six win last night. So good, good mojo to start the season. And we have some really fun angles today. So I'm excited for this show. I think this 4-game slate, I don't know about you personally. I love these smaller slates in basically every single way, right? Like I think on the pick'em sites, we end up getting more like peripheral picks. Because they know that there are only so many, superstars on the slate when it's a 4-gamer. So you get more of those kind of peripheral secondary type players. And then on the DFS side of things, you get more concentrated, more condensed ownership, which everybody knows I like because I just play a leverage style. So yeah, I'm really excited for tonight's games.
Well, let's not waste any time here. Let's talk about some of the picks. You and I have been going back and forth this morning as we normally do, getting back into the swing of things here in the first week of the regular season. Let's start on Underdog, right? Where if you haven't signed up yet for Underdog, promo code FTN at sign up, you get 100% deposit match bonus. I believe still up to $1,000 and a free discounted pick. Right now, Underdog's got profit boost tokens, I think for like 3 or 4 more days here. Any NBA only entry, you can get a 20% profit boost. So promo code FTN at sign up. Let's talk about, I think we're looking at some first quarter props here to start off the dime today.
Yeah, we are. This is really solid. So I think like obviously one of the big potential advantages is just being ahead of the curve on some of these rotations. And Jaylen Brown only played like 5.5 first quarter minutes. And importantly, they were up by 7, so it's not like they, needed a spark or to change something around. And there was no foul trouble of any kind. It really seemed purposeful. They want him playing the entire second quarter. They don't want him playing too many minutes to start the year. So I think we're going to see that again. So I love the lower on 5.5 first quarter points for Jaylen Brown. And you can pair that for some correlation with another one that I love, which is Derek White, higher than 3.5 first quarter points. He played like 9 minutes, and we know how well he's been shooting. So I think that pairing, both of them individually are great, and together when you're getting all that correlation, because like think about how much more competition there is for usage when you're talking about like a 5.5 minute span that Jaylen Brown is on the court. He needs to be doing it right then and there, or he's not going to have a chance to go over 5.5. And if Derek White is hitting 2 threes in that time instead, boom, we're set. So I think it's super correlated, and I love them both anyway. So yeah, Jaylen Brown, lower 5.5 first quarter points. Derek White, higher 3.5 first quarter points.
When I think looking too at what some of the things we heard out of Boston in the preseason, right, where they're talking about, right, you're looking at the Wizards tonight for the second game on Boston's schedule. Major favorites here. I think last time I looked, it was 13 in favor of the road Celtics. And they talked a lot about in the preseason, like when they see some of these like lower level teams where they know they should come in here and take care of business, that they're going to try to emphasize giving a few more minutes to a Pritchard, a Sam Hauser, maybe even going as deep like in blowout time, right? Maybe you get extended time for a guy like Jordan Walsh in the fourth quarter. But I think that kind of plays even further into your idea, right? Looking at that first quarter rotation on Tuesday night, applying that to our first quarter entries here for Boston. And I think we can build on that entry too, right? I've got a first quarter pick that I've been eyeing since Tuesday night when it went up on Underdog. And look, it's Wednesday, man. It's the Spurs' first game of the season. So yes, I'm going to have some Spurs talk here today. But Julian Champagnie, right? No Devin Vassell for at least the first 2 weeks of this season. Julian Champagnie should be locked back into that starting role. Again, a guy who played about 20 minutes per game last year. I think he gets into the high 20s, maybe even crest 30 here tonight, again, with Vassell out of the picture. His first quarter points prop is set at 2.5. And what does Champagnie do best? Stand out there, catch and shoot threes, right? We just need him to go out there, bang 1 3 in the first quarter, and this one hits. So I would like to add the Julian Champagnie more than 2.5 first quarter points to that entry, make it a nice little 3 pick. You can get the little 20% profit boost, and all of a sudden this is a 7x entry.
I love that. Yeah, it's a perfect start, and it also sets the stage nicely for I think what we want to do on pick six tonight, because we have this like pattern now where we're establishing, all right, higher on one guy's points, lower on another's, and on pick six that can be even more impactful because we saw last night the four most popular pick six picks were higher or actually over on points. And that was Giannis, Lillard, Maxey, and Morant. So it's not just like
All
people
studs.
are, going, yeah, it's all
Yeah.
studs, which makes it, and that was on I should say a 3-pick slip on a massive slate. So as if you go to like a 6-pick slip on a smaller slate like this, those usage percentages are going to be really, really high, which sets us up for all of this leverage, which means instead of that, 25x payout that we're so used to on prize picks and underdog for a 6 of 6, if we go 6 of 6 tonight while leveraging those stud over on points, we could be looking at 50x. We could be looking at 100x payouts. So really excited for that strategy. And I think honestly, the first one, we just talked about a Jaylen Brown under, but I love Jaylen Brown over 24.5 points with Jason Tatum under 28.5 points. You can also, instead of going to Jaylen Brown, like if Tatum under is the one that I actually want to focus and prioritize here, because I just expect so many people to be on the over that I want that one to fail so that I can get that 50x, 100x payout. So you can go Jaylen Brown. You can go Derek White over 16.5. Our tool really loves that one. If they put up some Sam Hauser stuff, you could go there. Peyton Pritchard stuff, you can go there, really hoping for that blowout. And honestly, you could do multiple of those, right? Like you could go Jason Tatum under 28.5 with White, Hauser, and Pritchard over. That's going to still be really, really well correlated. So lots of stuff we can do there. But any other stud points props that you actually like the under on, not just the potential for all this leverage?
I think the one that stuck out to me is the one you brought up already, right? Looking in and I just want to make sure everybody watching knows we've got the DraftKings Pick 6 tool now live at FTN Fantasy, and you can come join us here at FTN. Right now, you can get 20% off a subscription at FTN Fantasy with the promo code FTN Hoops. I want to say that goes through the end of today, maybe tomorrow. Do you know exactly when that sale ends out?
It ends midnight tonight. So last chance to get in, 20% off FTN Hoops. FTNFantasy.com/pricing. You'll find everything you need.
So I haven't seen anything that really stuck out to me in terms of those the points for the studs, right, on pick 6. But I was again poking through that pick 6 tool, and this one lines up kind of, I like to joke about just the noggin model, things that stand out to me when I just look over the board. And Chet Holmgren, who we'll talk a little bit about from a DFS perspective as well here in a few minutes. I like his more than selection on rebounds. It's set at 7.5 over there on pick 6. And the fact that there's no Isaiah Hartenstein for the foreseeable future, right? 5-6 weeks, I believe, was the timeline. I think that's too low. The model thinks that is much too low, right? He's projected like 9.8 rebounds tonight against the Nuggets. So it's not the best individual matchup going up against Jokic. We see what Jokic does against guys like Chet, guys like Wemby, who he just has a massive weight difference against. But I still think Chet's going to be out there enough tonight. 7.5 rebounds is too low. So that's one that I'm clicking in alongside those correlated points props that you're pointing out.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I want to hear your take on the Anthony Edwards under 26.5, because I am once again a big fan of DiVincenzo over 11.5 points, and definitely can see a ton of correlation there, right? Like we saw DiVincenzo come off the bench. He played 32 minutes. He took a lot of shots, including a lot of threes, wasn't shooting well. In fact, he even also went 2 of 4 from the line. So he finished at 11 points. But man, if he shoots even a little bit better in any phase tonight, he should clear 11.5 pretty easily. And we saw it with New York last year, right? When Brunson didn't have his big games, it was largely because guys like DiVincenzo were taking 10 to 12 threes. So another spot here with Anthony Edwards where the correlation is so strong, I don't even feel like I need to love the Anthony Edwards under to love this pairing. But I'm curious anyway how you feel about that Edwards under.
I think the Edwards under is a little bit enticing in the sense that if you said, Zach, you have to take more or less 26 and a half points. I'm going to lean slightly towards the less than side of it, right? Ant averaged right around 26 points per game last season. And he, of course, wasn't shy on Tuesday night. I think he put up 25 shots and didn't shoot particularly well. But this game, 221 implied total, right? It's the lowest on tonight's slate. We've seen some of those overs creep back up here to start the season compared to where they were at the end of last year. But then you look at the tool, right? You look at what the FTN fantasy model is spitting out here today. We've got him right around 23 points. And so like Anthony Edwards can still have a perfectly fine game and score right there in the mid-20s. And I'm with you on liking DiVincenzo's more than selection there. So again, when we're looking for these correlation plays, right, the research that you found here early in the season where those studs, everybody's taking the overs on those guys. Again, that seems to fit the mold to me today on what we're looking at on Pick 6.
Zach, there's one more that stands out like crazy in the tool that I need your input on because this is a hard one to stomach. Luka under 30.5 with Klay Thompson over 16.5. My hesitation is that it is so incredibly difficult to model a player like Klay Thompson coming to a new team. When you think about, obviously Steph Curry had a ton of usage in Golden State, but so much of what Steph did was off ball, and so much of what he did off ball was like in conjunction with Klay, right? Like they were both running off screens, and a lot of the time the attention the defense had to pay to Steph left things wide open for Klay Thompson. Here, you've got two high usage guys in Luka and Kyrie, but the difference is they're both really ball dominant guys. So my basketball side of analysis here is saying I don't think the usage is going to be there for Klay the way it was. And I actually like the under more on Klay, but man, the tool just kind of working with the data and how it expects the usage to kind of flow through this team as a whole, but specifically with Klay, loves the Luka under, loves the Klay over, and it gives us a really nice correlation boost too. So what do you think here?
I think you and I are in lockstep here. I am a lot less bullish on Klay Thompson than the model is here today. And if I was again, kind of like you mentioned off the top there, it's never going to feel comfortable to take unders on a guy like Luka, who's going to have the ball the whole game, who's going to be chucking, and a guy that, right, it seems like, at least in the odds, right, the market is saying that this is the year that Luka is going to finally take home that MVP award. And as much respect as I think we should give a Spurs defense when Victor Wembanyama is on the floor, he ain't playing 48 minutes. And that's one I think that I'm going to personally stay away from. And if anything, with the way that Klay looked in the preseason, and we shouldn't let that dictate all of our decisions or 100% of a decision on a prop like that, but I might even lean towards the less than on Klay because he did not look good in the preseason. And I know he averaged 18 points a game last year, and he's going to have big games this season. It's just not somewhere I feel comfortable going on a slate where I think we have enough viable options to build some pretty nice entries really across the board, and not have to mess with a Luka under or counting on Klay to get it going here tonight.
Yeah, I think another point here is this is a line that I could see moving up. So if I look back at 4:00 and Luka's now 31.5 and Klay has dropped from 16.5 to 15.5, I'm going to fire on it. If he's up to 32.5, I'm going to fire on it, right? So I think that's the way that I'm going to play this instead of trying to hit this now, just identifying it as a line that I really, really can see moving. Shea's also at 30.5. Tatum's at 28.5. I think the public especially is going to view Luka as being in a tier of his own and should separate from those two guys. So I could easily see Luka getting to 31.5. In fact, I expect that, but I also could see him getting to 32.5.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. And again, that's why you want to get in here early, right? Get in there in the morning, check out the lines that you like, have some lines to keep an eye on, right? And that's what we'll do here throughout Thursday afternoon. I know I apologize if my mic is a little bit soft here today. I tried to up the volume there. We've had a couple complaints in the FTN Fantasy Discord. But then our buddy Adam Strange is coming in off the top rope, says, Zach's mic probably got blown out from the excitement of the first Wemby slate. So you're not wrong. You're probably not wrong. Hey, our buddy Anthony in here saying F the Spurs. P-Buck wants to know when Wemby talk. But before we get into some Wemby talk here, Alex. Trevor was asking, Hauser over 8.5 points. Scored well without Porzingis last year, and assuming this will be a blowout, he should get more minutes. Do you have any thoughts on Sam Hauser? I know the model has him right around 9,
Mm-hmm.
so the model's leaning over there as well. And I think Trevor's theory there is pretty sound, right? Going up against the Celtics, that's not bad for these second unit guys on Boston. Or going up against the Wizards, not terrible for these second unit guys on Boston.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use that for sure as a leverage pick on pick 6. And I think on underdog, you can also use it as just like correlation with, a Tatum under or something like that, essentially saying what happens if this game blows out. And in fact, I think better than a Tatum over would be like a Kuzma under with a Hauser over, something like that. There are definitely ways to use it that I really like. I don't think I like it enough to use it as a one-off.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense to me. The Cards is in here. Good to see Cards. Says, do you enter your pick 6 entry now or wait till later? This is his first time going through pick 6, I think.
Yeah, I do a little of both, right? And so I want to do – so I guess there are two things in play here. The first is the earlier you do it, the more likely you are to get really good numbers on players. Mm-hmm. The downside is the earlier you do it, the less of an idea you have of what people are doing. And actually, you also can get better numbers the longer you wait if those numbers that you're looking for are unders, right? Almost everything is more likely to go up than down. I think last night we saw 65% of the overall bets were on the overs. And among the most popular bets, even more of those are overs, right? So essentially, like, I like to do 2 waves of picks. The first wave is as early as possible. I'm just trying to find the best lines, and then I'm trying to find some leverage stuff. But then I'm also going to wait. And like we just talked about Luka, I'm going to wait for Luka to get to 31.5 or 32.5 before I take the leverage under on him, because then it's a better number for me, right? And so, I think there are advantages to both. And so I actually like to do both.
I think it's a good question there, Cards. Trevor, appreciate you stopping by, my friend. All right, Alex, let's talk a little bit of the DFS slate tonight, right? Because it is Thursday night. We've got Thursday night football going on, but still some sizable NBA contests on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And I want to start on DK here. You know I'm a DK guy over FanDuel mostly. I play on both every day, but more volume over here on DraftKings. And all right, P-Buck wanted to know when the Wemby talk was. Here it is. Okay. I can't get away from Wemby on DraftKings. Shocker. You never heard me say that before.
Yeah.
But right around 20% projected owned in our first run of the model this morning. 4-game slate, and we've got a lot of spend up options. So I don't see that ownership skyrocketing throughout the day. And Luka's on the slate. Jokic is on the slate. You got SGA on the slate. Domantas Sabonis, Jason Tatum, Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox, right? The list goes on. But to me, Wemby being a few $100s cheaper than Jokic and Luka at the top. And again, I got Spurs colored glasses on. I try to remove them when I'm making my lineups, when I'm making my prop picks on these sites. Victor Wembanyama, for my money, is the best fantasy producer over the long haul on this slate in the league, in the basketball world. And so Victor Wembanyama, right at 20% owned, 10-7 on DraftKings. He's my favorite spend up. I got to go there on opening night. Like, we've seen this kid get continuously better from a real hoop standpoint, a statistical standpoint, push the United States to the brink with an undermanned French team this summer in the Olympics. I think he's ready to go. And he's got some real NBA players next to him this year, Alex. I saw Harrison Barnes make an entry pass in the preseason. I almost fell out of my chair. It's going to be fun to watch this team, at least early in the season here. And I'm rolling with Wemby on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think he's also a great play, especially because he's got the power forward eligibility over there. You can slot him in at forward. You can slot him in at center. And, we like to look at the GPP scores here at FTN Fantasy. And if you look over there on FanDuel, second highest GPP score on the slate right now is Victor Wembanyama. And if I open up the DraftKings side, third highest. So again, I think Victor Wembanyama, not too highly owned here. I don't think the price is as expensive as we're going to see it here in a couple weeks. So shocker to nobody here, I think, at FTN that I'm all over Wemby at what I think is a modest ownership for a 4-game slate.
Yeah, I'm very much in agreement here. And it's actually a pretty simple argument. Like last year, he was already in the Jokic and Luka tier in terms of fantasy points per minute. We expect him to really close that minutes played per game gap between himself, Luka, and Jokic this year. The matchup is pretty solid. And as you said, the ownership is actually trailing Jokic right now a little bit. So we haven't projected above those guys. We haven't projected lower owned than those guys. He's also cheaper than those guys. That spells, a fantastic spend up play. So I'm with you on Wembanyama. And it's actually his teammate, Jeremy Sohan, who comes in first in the GPP score. So I am with you on this Spurs bandwagon tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were talking, I know before we went live here, I sent you a screenshot of what I had in my notes that says, but my slate breaker on DraftKings is Jeremy Sohan. Mm-hmm. And then I opened up the ownership projections page with those GPP scores, and out in front by a wide margin here tonight is Jeremy Sohan, 4,600 on DraftKings here. I just can't get away from it. This guy, Jeremy Sohan, right? Part of the Polish national team, playing in some of those games this summer. He looked awesome, and he was much better statistically from a fantasy standpoint down the stretch last year, right? We don't have this ridiculous tank Jeremy Sohan point guard experiment going on to start this year. He was much more comfortable in a more appropriate role down the stretch last year. He's also shown that in the preseason this year. This is a guy who can fill up the stat sheet, whether Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul are on the floor with him or not. Let's see these preseason stat lines, Alex. Again, these aren't blowing you out of the water, but he's 4,600. 21 minutes against the Thunder, 9.6 boards, 4 assists, and a block. 20 minutes against the Magic, right? Not exactly the dregs of the league, 12 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, a steal, and a block. 24 minutes against the Jazz, 15 and 8, 3 steals, and an assist. 28 minutes against the Heat, 18 and 11, double-double, an assist, and a steal. This is a guy who, again, contributes across the box score, and at a sub-5K price tag on this slate is a smash play in my book. The field is not ignoring him. 39% projected ownership on DraftKings right now, but 60% smash rate in the model. And the fact that the GPP score is this high with almost 40% ownership, to me, tells you how strong of a play this is.
Yeah, it also tells me there is some danger that he's going to steam up, but honestly, he could get to 50%, 55%, and he's still going to look like a really solid play. So I'm definitely with you on Sohan. And beyond that, I think my first thought for potential slate breaker is coming from the same game. It's Daniel Gafford. And part of it here is like, we talked about Clay and how he might fit with this offense earlier. But the biggest thing for me is just how much attention a defense has to pay to what's going on around the perimeter. Between Luka, all those actions, between Kyrie and all those actions, between Clay out at the three-point line, working off-ball stuff. That's a whole lot of attention. I think the room to operate in the middle, whether it's catching lobs, rolling in the pick and roll, or just getting some easy putback opportunities. I think Gafford's really going to feast in this offense. And then as long as he's on the floor, the stocks upside and rebounding upside defensively is also there. So I really like Gafford in this matchup, and I just like him kind of period in this new offense. So at $4,500, like he strikes me as somebody who a couple weeks from now we're going to be talking about as still being viable at $5,500 or $6,000. So right now I want to take advantage of this price, especially because it doesn't even look like this price is coming with much ownership.
Yeah, and one thing, right, not just with Gafford, but PJ Washington, these guys that came into Dallas at the trade deadline last year, going through a full offseason, a full training camp now in this system, right? Like, I think Dallas fans are pretty excited about what this team can do this year, taking the next step, right, getting back to the finals and hopefully getting over that hump. Because, again, we talked about Luka's MVP odds, these new guys now more integrated into the team. I like that call on Daniel Gafford there. The last guy I want to mention, not a slate breaker, but highly owned, and I think for good reason, is Alex Caruso, right, in his new digs there in Oklahoma City. He's 4,800, guard and forward eligible. This is not a guy that's going to lose minutes because he can't D up like Josh Giddey did in that spot last year. And Isaiah Hartenstein, obviously, out of the mix with the injury, like we mentioned. I think we would have seen the Thunder go big. I think when Hartenstein gets healthy again in a few weeks, I think we'll see them change this starting lineup and be more matchup dependent. But with the Hartenstein injury, I think we're going to see, right, Shea, Caruso, Dort, J-Dub, Chet. And I think Caruso, again, the guard forward eligibility, he's just a fantastic piece, especially in an MME build, to tie together different types of lineups, right? Get ownership in on a couple of these studs, right? If I'm playing a 20 max, I'm going to be over the field on Wemby. We already know that. But I'm not going to full fade SGA. I'm going to have Luka. I'm going to have Jokic shares. And Alex Caruso is a guy that can kind of tie your whole build together in a similar price tier as Jeremy Sohan. I'll have plenty of lineups with both of those guys in there.
Am I crazy, or is there only one questionable tag on this slate of any relevance in Sam Hauser?
I think you might be right. Let me look up the NBA injury report. Usually I have the, I just have an injury report tab that continuously stays open on my screen here for 8 months or so. It looks like you're correct. That is the only Q tag that we're looking at here tonight.
Yeah,
I look at this injury report and I see Nikola Topic there on the OKC roster. This team is filthy rich, man, with talent. They control the Clippers draft picks the next 4 years. Oh my God. I did want to answer Card's question here because he's jumping back to Wembanyama and saying, what does Pop do with Wemby's minutes, right? You talked about it a little bit, how we think that minutes average is going to come up this season. I also want to point out what he did near the end of last year, where he's getting consistently low to mid 30s in minutes. I do think his minutes averages, at least for the first half of the year, probably settle in the low 30s, but I think we're seeing that uptick. Victor himself has talked about throughout the preseason, their progression of his minutes, of putting on mass, right? He talked about yesterday, he said, no, I did not gain 25 freaking pounds in the offseason. That's impossible. He actually gives us, he's so blunt sometimes, he gives us a little bit of a window into how the Spurs operate with a guy like him. He said between 1 and 5% body mass is what they're trying to add each offseason. So, but to get back to the actual question, minutes, I think we see low 30s, but like we saw last season, Cards, when they get into these highly contested games that are close down the stretch, he'll let Victor go for the last 8, 9, 10 minutes sometimes, and we could see him in a close game get into the mid 30s. And at that point, I think it's hard for me to see Wemby not being the highest fantasy scoring player on this slate if he can get to the mid 30s, right? But I'll caution, don't let the 14-point spread in Washington distract you from the fact that the Spurs are 8.5-point road dogs here in Dallas tonight. This one could get ugly.
It definitely could. We have another question here on the $5,000 Russell Westbrook. I love this guy, so I'm always happy to talk Russ. I'll tell you, my first thought is I feel like Westbrook fits on this team in a very similar way to how Bruce Brown did, where he does so much of the quote unquote dirty work, the Marcus Smart type role, the offensive rebounds, cutting to the basket. I think that aspect of what he brings to the table will fit perfectly around Jokic. The biggest question though I have is just what exactly are his minutes going to look like? Is he actually playing enough to be worth a $5,000 price tag? But I also think one other way that he will help them is obviously Jokic isn't the most mobile guy getting up and down the floor. And so sometimes when Denver has struggled in the past, it's been that they aren't getting enough of the easy possessions, right? The transition stuff. And Westbrook will help them immensely in that aspect when he's on the floor. So I really like the fit for this team. I'm just not sure about the role early on for this price. What do you think there?
I think it's somebody that I'm going to have maybe a couple shares of. I'm not super excited about getting to rush shares here tonight, especially with the way maybe it's just my recency bias where I was coming a little bit down, backing off of Jamal Murray with his knee acting up again in the preseason. And then in the finale, Jamal goes out there, drops a quick 25, in limited minutes. So with the fact that I'm not sure about the Russ minutes yet, the fact that we talked about Caruso a few $100s cheaper, Sohan a few $100s cheaper, right? You brought up Gafford. And then as we had a comment in the FTN Fantasy Discord just 2 minutes ago, says, I like going back to Nas. I also like going back to Nas Reed here tonight at 5,100. Not obviously as efficient from a fantasy point per minute perspective as a guy like Russ throughout his career, but still should be over a point per minute type of guy this season. And again, such a bad start to the year for Nas from a fantasy perspective. I also like going back there. So Russ is a secondary option for me at this price tonight, but certainly not somebody I'm going to see in your lineup and ask you what the heck you're doing, right? Yeah. There's certainly merit to the play.
Yeah, I mean, we've got him at 23 minutes. We haven't projected for slightly over a fantasy points per minute. So, if you think he's going to play 26, that makes him a really solid play. So he's close enough that if you think that we're wrong at all about that minutes projection, like the margin is there for him to be a solid play.
Yeah, and Cards bringing up Julian Strother, who had a fantastic preseason, I think is like, if he wasn't already, he earned a role here to start this season at 3,200 guard forward eligible for the savings on a slate where I want to get multiple studs into my lineup. I think Strother makes a little bit more sense for the way I want to build tonight compared to a 5K Russ. But again, this slate to me is a lot more fun than what we had last night, where we had really not a ton of available value, but a lot of guys that we wanted to spend up on in like the 7 to 9K range. Tonight, we've got viable value right from the rip here this morning. And I think, again, as we go throughout the day, you're going to be able to see how ownership changes, maybe pinpoint a couple of other areas that we want to attack. And of course, we will talk about that in the Discord. I do want to close our DFS talk with a little bit more FanDuel. And AJ in here saying 5K SAR on FanDuel is kind of interesting if he knows where the ball is supposed to end up. And yeah, like, Alex Sarr is somebody that, again, terrible summer league. But then he comes out in the preseason, he's putting the ball in the basket, and he looked okay. I think to a point where they held him out of the last 2 preseason games because we've seen enough from Alex Sarr in the preseason, and that's not something that I really had on my proverbial bingo card. But I think it's a great call out, right? 5K for Alex Sarr. He's right there next to guys like Naz Reid, Dario Saric, Harrison Barnes, Zach Collins, PJ Washington. Like, I think in that range, it's between Sarr and Naz for me, and I think I'm leaning towards the rookie if I'm going in that 5K range at power forward on FanDuel. What's your take on Alex Sarr here tonight? Because again, like, we're also not surprised if we get another like 0 for 12 type of, just crap shooting performance. Like, How are you approaching the number 2 overall pick?
What do you think his minutes are going to look like? Where do you expect him in the rotation?
Yeah, that's one. When I went in and was looking at our minutes this morning, I raised him up. I think he's in the upper 20s here tonight. I think he's going to start at the 4 next to Jonas Valanciunas. Mm-hmm. I think he'll slide over and play some at the 5. Of course, Bagley is there and Rashawn Holmes, but none of J-Val, Bagley, or Holmes have the meaning, the capital, the investment that the Wizards have made like they have into Sarr at number 2 overall this past summer. So again, I think also on DraftKings, right, he's 6K. But if you're going to max enter one of these tournaments tonight, he's power forward eligible. I would not enter 150 lineups on DraftKings tonight with 0 exposure to Alex Sarr. I think on both sites he's viable. Obviously, a more friendly price tag on FanDuel.
I think my biggest question is, let's say he gets the start. Are you still expecting him to play blowout minutes?
That's a good question.
Because if the answer is yes, I think he's a really good play.
Yeah, I think more so than your typical blowout, right? Like, J-Val's not going to be out there. Like, maybe Marvin Bagley. Rashawn Holmes is not a guy that plays a ton of minutes anymore.
And it's not like those guys are super young. They're pretty much known commodities at this point. So what are you playing them in a blowout for? Especially like we talked about, how raw Sarr is. You want him playing as many minutes as possible, getting up to speed with the NBA game. So it would make sense for him to play blowout minutes.
I do want to mention, if we're talking guys that could play blowout minutes, like, and maybe just overall, at least on DraftKings from this Wizards team, Bilal Coulibaly, 4,200, guard forward eligible. Like, to me, he's the top play on DraftKings from this Wizards team. But I think he kind of fits the mold there where, like, going to be in a starting role, might also play blowout minutes. So 2 guys, I think, FanDuel for Sarr, Coulibaly on DraftKings. Probably our favorite Wizards value type plays here tonight that are going to play some significant minutes.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
an important point there too, Zach, is if they are playing blowout minutes, there's also a good chance they're in a role in those blowout minutes that's a lot better than their standard role, right? Like Sarr might be getting center minutes, Koulibaly might be getting point guard minutes in a blowout. So that would make their fantasy point per minute expectations go up. Like I think if you're playing one, it makes sense to play the other since they would both benefit from the same script.
Yeah, that's a good point. Last question I want to take here on the DFS side of things is thoughts on Champagny. I will caution folks, you've got the double Champagny night here, so play Julian on the Spurs, not Justin on the Wizards. I think he is a more than viable piece of value, especially over here on DraftKings, right? Like, to me, he's a little bit safer than a Julian Strother type, but you're paying $600 more, and you don't have the guard forward eligibility on Champagny there. So somebody I'll have exposure to, but not going crazy. And over on FanDuel, I just wanted to give my slate breaker there. My slate breaker on FanDuel this morning is going to be Chet Holmgren because we've got Victor Wembanyama, but he's got the power forward center eligibility. But center only Jokic, center only Sabonis. I think those guys are all going to somewhat cannibalize each other ownership-wise. And so the fact you can get a sub 8K Chet with no Hartenstein, also no Jalen Williams, right? J Will, not J Dub. He's still out for this team as well. So I think, again, Chet sub 8K ownership should be fairly muted for the price. He's my slate breaker over there on FanDuel. Although, as much as I wanted to go not really off the board, but ride with the ownership that the field is showing on 6.5K Jordan Poole. Remember, Tyus Jones is out of town. Malcolm Brogdon is hurt. Jordan Poole is going to start at point guard tonight. And I'll also throw in one last DK mention. I believe we've got a minimum price min price point and shooting guard eligible Bub Carrington tonight. I will have a non-zero amount of Bub in my 20 max build on DraftKings as well.
Another guy who would probably benefit from a blowout. And I'll also say Chet has that same dual positional eligibility on DraftKings. So pretty solid there as well.
I just wanted to close with a couple of Prize Picks props. You know, I love the fantasy score board over there at Prize Picks. So one that actually already went up from 25.5 to 26. I still like it at 26 is Michael Porter Jr. The 25.5 fantasy score was a really nice number. I like Chet more than 36 fantasy points. Again, I think our model has him around 38. And then Jonas Valanciunas, right? I'm not going to get him on the draft or the DFS side tonight, but I'll take a more than selection on 22.5 fantasy score for Jonas Valanciunas. If he gets anywhere near 20 minutes, and I think we've got him at 26, he's going to smash that 22.5 fantasy score number. So I like a more than selection there as well.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? I'm going to take it in a different direction for some final picks. We're going to football tonight. Thursday night football.
Thursday night.
Yeah, we have
Vikings Rams.
Yeah, we've got a pretty phenomenal wide receiver 2 matchup for Jordan Addison. I love his over, whether it's 43.5, 44.5. I even got 41.5 a couple nights ago. That is a spectacular one, in my opinion. The matchup is great, and just his usage in this offense. He's such a talented guy, big play, explosive guy, and yet he never can be paid attention to that much from a defense because everyone has to pay attention to Justin Jefferson. So he's been an explosive play machine for this team all season. The Rams give up a ton of those, so I love him. And then we have to be a little bit careful because we don't know exactly what's going on in this wide receiver room for LA. But assuming that Tutu Atwell ends up being the quote-unquote third receiver behind Kupp and Demarcus Robinson, he would be phenomenal. As long as there's no Puka, as long as Kupp isn't out, wide receiver 3s have torched Minnesota. At least they've produced. I wouldn't say torch because it's more of like Minnesota just saying we're going to take away the number 2 or something, and teams are going to have to throw against us so much because we are winning by so much in every single game that the wide receiver 3 has just been kind of automatic against them. Tim Patrick had an easy win last week on his prop, and I think we're going to see the same for Tutu if he's in that role tonight.
Love that call. It's a double screen kind of night here. NBA on TNT, Thursday night football. Can't wait for it. We appreciate all of you tuning in, sticking with us here on the Thursday edition of the Daily Dime here at FTNFantasy.com. Back tomorrow, same time, same place, breaking down Friday's slate. from all perspectives. Again, that NBA sale here at FTN tonight. If you haven't signed up yet to join us, come on over. You get 20% off your FTN fantasy subscription with the promo code FTN Hoops. That offer expires tonight at midnight. So we'll see you over here. We'll see you in the Discord, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
More
Goodbye.
free content too. We've got
There you go.
the show tonight, 5:30 Eastern.
Oh, that's right. That's
between
right.
myself and Tugan. Yeah. So lots of free content coming your way, and we'll be talking basically like the exact same conversation that Zach and I just had about the NBA. Tugan and I will have about the NFL. So we'll see you there.
I'm going to be tuned into that. All right, everybody. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button on your way out. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.